Thanks, Lynn, and good afternoon, everyone, and wonderful to be here. And I feel very privileged to be able to, on behalf of the board and ECA, and I think probably all of you in this room, take the opportunity to say a few words about Rosemary and to thank her for her contribution. Now, our chair, Louise Sylvan, is overseas at the moment and so has been unable to be here, and she would have loved to have been here acknowledging Rosemary herself. But I do have a few words from her, and I'll end with those. I'm going to fall into Lynn's trap of needing to have glasses on, glasses off. I've arranged some thoughts about Rosemary into a number of categories, none of which are roasts, Rosemary, so I hope that doesn't disappoint you. This is all pretty sincere. Rosemary's made an enormous impact on the sector, being here from the birth of ECA for 5 years, so seeing it through its very important foundational stage. And I am sure you'll all agree she's taken it very far in a very long way as the leader of a terrific group of people. Some of the themes, you know, when Rosemary first started with ECA and when ECA first started, the sector had perhaps fallen a bit into the practice of resolving issues between consumers and industry by ending up with regulators having to resolve things. And I think one of the hallmarks of Rosemary's touch on the organisation, on the sector, has been from being a leader in moving from conflict to collaboration. Collaboration and consensus are part of Rosemary's DNA, and so they've been injected in at the ground level to ECA, and evidence this conference and some of the themes and some of the comments that were made a minute ago actually by Ross about consumers, business, understanding each other, etc. I think that the Energy Charter is just one recent example and very important example of that consensus moving across the whole sector, and Rosemary playing an instrumental part in getting that underway, and ECA supporting that sort of a move. Second area, now I have to be careful in saying this because I don't think Rosemary would claim all the credit for this, but in some areas, for some consumers, prices are starting to turn the corner. So things appear to be heading in the right direction. So while success has many parents, and it's not just people claiming it, a lot of people have played a role in perhaps that corner being turned. I'm sure many of you in this room will have still ringing in your heads for a very long time the phrase, "not $1 more than necessary, not a day too early." If you don't know that already, you haven't drunk the Kool-Aid. So that is a wonderful mantra, which has been, I think, very powerful and useful for consumers. Third area I want to talk about is how Rosemary's played a strong role in bringing core consumer experience to the fore. Again, witness the last couple of days, and witness the kind of work that has been presented here in terms of what the consumer experience really is, and the validation by evidence of the core experience of energy consumers to a national audience. So now value for money, trust, confidence, it's not that we've achieved all those, but they're part of the vernacular. It's what they're talking about. It's what we've been talking about today. And a marker of the influence of that sort of language and vernacular is we have observed over the last year or so some of the language from the Energy Consumers Sentiment Survey finding its way into the mouths of other important players in the sector. So we now see regular reports on the health of the market by AEMC and by Energy Security Board, which is using some of that information, evidence and language. And so we're seeing that by putting that sort of thing into the public domain, we're seeing things being measured. And of course, measurement is a way of bringing things forward, managing them and getting to outcomes. Two more themes, so bear with me, and then a few words from Louise. The next is pivot to customers. So the conversation over the last 2 days is a demonstration of the profound shift that's occurred from a market where the question was, is there a problem? To yes, there is, and how are we going to fix it? And we just heard the rallying cry a minute ago. Rosemary's had a lot to do with that too, of course, in her leadership role. And we are now in no doubt that a profound reset is what's required. My last theme, before I move to Louise's comments, is a compliment, although it may not sound so immediately, and that is Rosemary could be described as being impatient and unapologetic on behalf of consumers and consumer outcomes. I do need to qualify that. So from day one, it was consumer outcomes moving the dial that Rosemary was trying to drive in the organisation and through the sector. And I'm sure many of you have had a Rosemary Sinclair moment where you've been thought perhaps that you're going to be, when you were meeting with her, you're going to be talking about some technical energy market issue, to quickly find that the context is always consumer outcome and consumer priority. So that impatience and unapologeticness has been very important to getting a long way very quickly and to infecting others with that sort of spirit. So, and the commitment to outcomes, I think, is a value that's going to live on in the DNA of the ECA. It's baked into the foundations through Rosemary's leadership for many, many years to come. And it can serve as a guiding principle for managing the challenging transition we have ahead of us. So as others were saying a minute ago, stand up, be impatient, don't apologise, there's a problem, and we're all stepping up to fix it. And Rosemary's done a massive job in that area. So I'm going to move now to a nice statement that Louise sent to me to read. So Louise has said, it's been a terrific pleasure working with Rosemary on the establishment of ECA, and I'm truly proud of how we've positioned this organisation and made sure that consumer concerns are increasingly at the forefront of all. Rosemary has managed with aplomb that difficult task of being a forceful critic while establishing and maintaining strong relationships simultaneously. Or in her words, being a critical friend. That's an important stance for a consumer organisation to take and to maintain, and we're all looking forward to continuing to strongly enable the voice of consumers and small business while working with our many colleagues in business, the market institutions and government, and in particular with our colleagues in the consumer and welfare movements. So that's from Rosemary. So finally, can I just from Rose, that's from Louise. Finally, Rosemary, can I say, in the words just quoted, you have been a wonderful critical friend of the sector. And as you go on to new challenges, don't be a stranger. Remain a friend, critical or otherwise. And really, just from all of us, thank you so much for the impact you've made. You'll have to step up. Oh, are you going first?
Thanks very much. Knowing that Virginia would make an erudite speech, I kept mine relatively brief, and I'll probably say a few of the same things. only it wouldn't be something I said without an irreverent political reference thrown in there, so I'll probably do that as well. Look, I'm very honoured to have been asked to just share a few thoughts on behalf of the consumer advocacy community as we see our dear friend and colleague Rosemary, just to thank her for her contribution as she deserts us for the greener pastures of anything other than the energy sector. Rosemary joined us 5 short years ago, bringing valuable experience from other sectors, including telco, education, media, and particularly helpfully rugby league. The energy landscape, as you recall, was quite different then. Who remembers 5 years ago? Good old days. Bills were through the roof. Reliability and security risks were causing concern. We were struggling to work out how to incorporate distributed energy into the system. Consumers were dissatisfied, and action on climate change was somewhat hampered by a single-minded coal-loving Prime Minister who was otherwise determined to effectively run the country. Who was otherwise determined to effectively run the country into the ground. Rosemary might recognise that as a recycled joke from 5 years ago as well. Now that was 2015, and obviously things are a lot different now. Okay, maybe they're not, but that's definitely not Rosemary's fault. So, jokes aside, without Rosemary's contribution, we would not be in as good a place to meet those challenges that we have today. Under Rosemary's leadership, ECA has created a new space, and I would say this event, like other Foresighting forums before it, is very symbolic of that, to allow voices and views to be shared so that we can understand each other better, and so that we can identify and solve what Rosemary would call the wicked problems and the challenges that face our sector, and therefore the society and climate and the economy that all depend on outcomes in our sector. And I'd say Rosemary has brought her very remarkable wisdom and balance to this space, and anyone who's spent a bit of time with Rosemary will know what I mean when I refer to that balance. It's in her ability to make anyone feel comfortable. Picking up on Virginia's point too, it's also her very judicious ability to make just the right people feel just a little bit uncomfortable about exactly the things that they should at exactly the right time and place. We see that balance also in Rosemary's gravitas and her good humour, not without traces of cheekiness occasionally, and in her capacity to dispense wisdom on tap while knowing when a question also needs to be taken home for a good mulling over. Rosemary, with these attributes, I'm sure they'll stand you in great stead for your next relatively simple task of managing the internet. As consumer advocates, we're always pretty careful when speaking on behalf of others to recognise the diversity of who we represent, but I think it's safe to say I speak for the entire community of energy advocates when I do say we will miss you and we'll always be grateful for your wisdom, your leadership and your friendship, and for your unwavering commitment to elevating the consumer voice. Go well, and funnily enough, although I had nothing else to say that was the same as Virginia, my closing words were also to go well and please don't be a stranger. Now, by popular demand, we have a couple of haiku, which I can't actually bring up because I don't have... Oh, I do have a cue. There we go. No, I don't because it's not working. We have a couple of haiku. Oh, there we go. To reflect on Rosemary's time and contribution to the sector, considering the state of things when she started, her contribution, and the state that she's leaving it in now. So, thanks.
I think it's only appropriate and fitting, because of Rosemary's personality and character, that Rosemary, you should have the last word.
Thanks very much, Virginia and Lynn and Craig and really everybody. I'm not going to have too many words. You'll be pleased to learn. I just wanted to say that I just feel extraordinarily privileged to have spent the last 5 years working with all of you on many different projects in many different ways. But I feel very much with a shared focus on getting better outcomes for energy consumers. The work that I love doing is work that is interesting and important for the community. And that's the work that we're all engaged in. And particularly now, the work is interesting and it's just unbelievably important for the community. And they've told us that in spades in our new research on expectations. It is really just the most wonderful start point for the work that you'll all continue to do, to know that the community regards energy as fundamentally important to everything that's important to them. It's really a great start point, and I think you'll keep coming back to that, I know, when the going gets tough and the opinions get divided. Just keep coming back to the fact that this is unbelievably important to the community for the things that are really important to them. So I would just like to thank everybody for their friendship and undoubted hard work. I am really proud that ECA has been a value-adding organisation. The work of consumer advocates is endless. And there was absolutely no room for us to duplicate anybody's effort. Our role was really to amplify and extend the work that had been going on long before ECA was born or before I turned up. So thank you very much, everybody. I don't feel as if I'm going too far, as a matter of fact. I'm really waiting for the worlds of energy and the internet to collide, and you'll know that I'm just on the other side of that equation, waiting for that wondrous day. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, thanks everyone. So look, thanks again for you joining us. This is a big thing for us. It's clearly a big thing for you because you've made such a significant time out of very busy lives. We do have some food outside, so anybody who has the time to stay and have a bit of a chat, please do. Otherwise, whenever you're travelling, travel safe. And we'll be in touch about what we'll be doing for the next year soon. Okay, thank you.